Hey, I'm Nicole with Simplified Fit. This is going to be your basic tutorial over how to track macros and calories. So at this point, you should be given your calorie goal, or maybe you're going to start with just macros, specifically protein. If you're working with me, we start out with protein and we generally stay with protein for the most part. So if you're trying to track protein, this is what you're going to do is you're going to have your goal in mind and say maybe, for example, maybe it's 100 grams a day. And what you're going to do is you're going to take that 100 grams, you're going to divide it outside into how many meals that you eat a day. So say you eat 3 meals a day, you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I want you to take that 100 grams and divide it by 4 or divide it by 3. And that's how many grams that you need to try to aim towards each setting. So maybe you have a snack and you're going to divide that into 4. Or maybe what you do is you have 4 meals, but generally your snack is a little bit lighter. So maybe you're going to have a large portion of your protein at breakfast, have a little bit smaller, and kind of split that protein goal between lunch and snack, and then finish up with your large portion of protein at dinner. So there's different ways that you can separate those just to have a clear goal of what you need at each sitting. It makes it much easier. But I do recommend that you use a scale instead of measuring cups or measuring spoons. Scales are extremely accurate on how many calories are in that particular ingredient. So I recommend getting a scale. You can get these anywhere. I get mine on Amazon just for like under $10, and it works really well. Okay. So with counting macros and calories, the way that weight loss works is we are going to consume less calories than we expend. And so the only way that we can know how many calories we're consuming very well is if we track. It's such a good skill to learn. Not that you live tracking calories and macros for the rest of your life, but it is a really good skill to know exactly what a portioned plate for you looks like. Sometimes you may want to lose 5 pounds, or maybe you want to gain some, 5 pounds and build some muscle. You need to be able to know what it looks like to add more protein to your plate, add a few more calories, or maybe even take a few more calories away from your plate. Eventually, doing a visual cue, maybe even using the portion control with, your palm, the palm method would be something that you can work towards. But before we can even work towards that, we need to have an understanding of what a calorie looks like, a calorie count and a calorie goal looks like through the day, specifically for your needs. Okay, so this is a great skill to start with. So you're going to grab whatever peanut butter or maybe a nut butter that you have, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do this one, not just with peanut butter, but for another ingredient as well. So what I recommend is that you're going to turn on your scale, and when you turn that on, you're going to have several different units in that. So what I would recommend is looking at the ingredient that you're trying to track and see what the nutrition facts, how are they measuring that ingredient. So for example, I have the nutrition facts for this peanut butter is I have 200 calories per serving. One serving gives me 2 tablespoons, which is 33 grams. So this one is my tablespoon that I use. Now, I could grab a measuring spoon and use the tablespoon, but what happens is that measuring could be a little off with my grams. So I recommend using the grams. Don't use a measuring cup, don't use measuring spoons. Look for the grams. For example, this one is in grams, some are in ounces, some are in milliliters. Use whatever form of volume that is measuring in your ingredient. So I'm going to make sure that my scale is at 0 and the units is set to grams specifically because this one says grams. So I'm going to take the lid off. I'm going to place this right on the scale. And now, for example, this is showing 308 grams, including the jar and everything. So I want to zero that out. Now your scale may be a little bit different. Mine has a 0 button where I can just hit that. And what that does, it's now reading 0, including this jar that's on my scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take as much peanut butter out as I want or that I need for my macros or my calorie count. and I'm going to see where this lands. So right now I've taken out 23 grams. And the reason I know that is because as soon as I scoop that out, it has added that back into what was on my scale. Okay, so I've got 23 grams. I can, for a serving of this, I can go up to 33 grams if I want a 200 calorie serving. Maybe I need 1 tablespoon, which would be half of 33 grams. And so at 23 grams, I got a little too much. Okay, so this is a little too much peanut butter. So I'm just going to try to take some of that off and get to that 16 grams. And I'm right at 16 grams. So I know that this whole serving right here gives me 16 grams of protein or of peanut butter. And then I'll just enter that into my app that I'm using. So when you find your ingredient, what you're going to do is you're going to open up your database on your phone, whatever tracking device you have, and you can, most of them have a scan button where you can scan the barcode and it will populate this particular brand of peanut butter. If it does not have that, you can create your own ingredient and add it yourself, and it's going to ask you to input the nutrition facts, and you're just creating your own ingredient to add this one in there. Some of the new products out may not be uploaded in that particular database, so you can add that in there, and then you're just going to measure out what you're using, add it to your day. So for example, I only wanted 16 grams of peanut butter for my sandwich, and I'm adding that in for my lunch, and it's going to total in there. Now I'm going down to 100 calories because I only did a half a serving. So it's going to automatically populate what a half a serving is for my fat and my protein. So that's an easier way to use instead of having to mess several different, spoons up or putting it in a different bowl. Just load the whole entire thing on your scale. Another ingredient that's really important to know how to measure is dry pasta. And so this one, what you're going to do is most measurements are going to call for the...
So I want to pause here for a second because I do want to add that there are some ingredients in specific trackers that are already called for the cooked version of either potatoes or pasta. And if that's the case, then use the cooked version volume and measure out, say, your 4 ounces of cooked pasta, as long as that coordinates with what the tracker says. Because 4 ounces of cooked pasta versus 4 ounces of uncooked pasta holds 2 different calorie counts and macros. So just make sure that it equates to whatever your tracker says.
I'm going to place my bowl on my scale, turn it on. This one measures in ounces, so I want to make sure that I am putting my unit in ounces to begin. Place my bowl on my scale. I'm going to zero that out, make sure everything turns to 0, and then I'm just going to add in until I get to 2 ounces. So this gives me a full serving of this particular pasta. Then I'm going to cook it. Now, for example, if you forget to measure and you've already cooked it and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? A general rule of thumb, it's not perfect, but it's close enough to be just fine, is that pasta generally doubles in size. So once I cook this, if I were to place this back on my scale, it would probably be 4 ounces. Okay, so for example, if you don't cook it, if you do cook it and you didn't measure, just measure out 4 ounces. That's going to be your 2 ounce measurement for your serving. And that way you can upload that in your app. All right, so another example. Say that you made your favorite cup of oats or your favorite dessert and you want to top it with yogurt or maybe Cool Whip. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the dessert that is already created. It's made, it's dished out just for you. How do you measure your topping? So what you're going to do is, say this is a lovely bowl of whatever your favorite dish is. You're going to place this on your scale, make sure that it's turned on, and whatever the ingredient is that you want to top it with. So say you're going to top it with, maybe you have chocolate chips or you have yogurt or Cool Whip that you want to top it with, but you want to make sure that you measure that out accordingly. You're going to make sure that you start with the unit based on the nutrition facts. So this one it's 3/4 a cup. I'm not going to use the measuring cup. I'm going to make sure I use my grams, and it's 170 grams per serving. Now, I don't really want to add 3/4 a cup of vanilla yogurt onto this dish, but I do want to add, you know, it's 170 grams, so maybe about 40 grams would be a good little spoonful to top this off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my dish on top of my scale, zero that out, make sure my units are turned to grams. Everything is set at 0. I'm going to get a spoon, serve out the amount that I want, and start small so that way you can add on and make sure that you reach the amount that you want. And then once you add it in there on top, it's going to reflect with the amount that is on your scale. So that way you're not having to, measure over here and then add it here. I'm all about keeping things minimal and washing as least amount of dishes as possible. And so you'll do the same thing. Say you want to add chocolate chips to this, make sure it's set to 0. These, I know exactly the brand this one is. This is the Bake Believe chocolate chips. And so it's in my app already. But what I would do is I would just make sure, start with a few sprinkles, see how many grams that gives me, knowing that I want to, only get a certain amount. And this is where, when you're tracking, it's a guessing game at first because you're still trying to visualize what a serving is for you. And say you're starting out doing, 1,800 calories, you need to kind of plan ahead a little bit and see where you have your room to put in these things. And so it's just kind of plug and play and seeing, maybe you can add a little bit more protein here or a little bit more carbs here to get to your 1,800 calories. And so just play around with it, see where things land for the first few days. And then, with the help of of your trainer, you can kind of zero in and see maybe where you can add some more protein or add some fiber here to reach your goals.
Okay, so hopefully this gets you started on your journey with counting and tracking macros or calories. But the best piece of advice is to keep it simple. Have recipes that are simple ingredients, things that you can track from home. Make your own lunches, make your own dinners from home as much as you can, and then start venturing out into maybe casseroles and those baked dishes. That's where it gets a little bit tricky, counting and tracking that sort of thing. You can do it. I'm going to show you how to do that. But for now, as you start out, just keep those recipes very simple because that way you're not going to get overwhelmed with the tracking. And keep recipes on repeat. The ones that you like, keep them on repeat. The same thing with your lunches and dinners. And so you're going to be a pro before you know it. But this gets you started. So now go track some food. See how it works.